You ever notice how, even when you're doing okay financially, there's this low hum of stress in the back of your mind? Like you're constantly calculating. Rent's paid, bills are covered, there's food in the fridge, but somehow you still feel like you're one bad month away from disaster. I used to think that was just me being paranoid. Turns out, it's not paranoia, it's biology. Your brain doesn't know the difference between running out of money and running out of food in the wilderness. To your nervous system, both situations trigger the same alarm. And that alarm doesn't turn off just because you got a direct deposit notification. Today, I want to talk about why your relationship with money feels so exhausting. Why even when you're trying to be rational, your brain keeps treating every financial decision like a survival threat. And why understanding this might be the thing that finally helps you relax. Here's what nobody tells you about money stress. It's not always about the actual numbers. You could have $10,000 in savings and still feel anxious. You could be debt-free and still wake up at 3 a.m. thinking about what happens if you lose your job. Because the stress isn't coming from your bank account. It's coming from the part of your brain that evolved to keep you alive in an environment where scarcity was the default. We talk about money like it's a logic problem. Budget better, save more, invest smarter. And sure, those things matter. But if it were just about logic, everyone with a spreadsheet would be calm and financially secure. That's obviously not true. The real issue is that your brain wasn't designed for the modern economy. It was designed for a world where resources were immediate and visible. You either had food or you didn't, shelter or you didn't. There was no such thing as a credit score, a retirement account, or a landlord raising rent by 15% with 30 days notice. But now, survival isn't about whether you can find water. It's about whether you can pay for health insurance, whether your car breaks down before payday, whether you can afford to take a sick day without losing half your income. And your brain, which is still running on ancient software, treats all of that the same way it treated being chased by something with teeth. The result? Constant low-level panic, decision fatigue, guilt every time you spend money on something that isn't essential, a feeling that you're doing something wrong even when you're doing everything right. Most people assume that if they just earned more, the anxiety would go away. And yeah, money solves money problems. But it doesn't automatically solve the psychological loop. Because the loop isn't about the amount, it's about the uncertainty. Your brain hates uncertainty more than it hates being broke. Let me explain how this actually works. There's a part of your brain called the amygdala. It's small, almond-shaped, and it's basically your threat detection system. It's constantly scanning for danger, and when it picks up on something that might hurt you, it triggers a stress response. Faster heartbeat, shallow breathing, cortisol flooding your system. The whole fight-or-flight package. In the past, that system saved your life. If you heard a rustling in the bushes, your amygdala didn't wait around to see if it was a tiger or just the wind. It assumed the worst and got you moving. But here's the problem. Your amygdala can't tell the difference between a physical threat and an abstract one. It doesn't know that a past due notice isn't the same as a predator. It just knows something feels wrong, and it responds the only way it knows how: panic mode. Now think about how often you interact with money. Rent is due. Groceries cost more than last month. Your car needs new tires. Your phone bill went up. Someone's getting married and you're expected to buy a gift and travel to the wedding. Your kid needs new shoes. Every single one of those things is a micro-trigger. And if you're living paycheck to paycheck, or even just close to it, those triggers don't stop. They stack, one after another, all day long. And because most of those threats are future-based, you can't resolve them the way your brain wants you to. You can't fight a bill. You can't run from rent. So the stress just sits there, unresolved, looping. This is why budgeting can feel so overwhelming. It's not because math is hard. It's because looking at your finances forces you to confront every possible future threat at once. And your brain, which is already on high alert, interprets that as danger. There's also something called loss aversion. This is a well-documented psychological bias. Basically, losing something hurts about twice as much as gaining the same thing feels good. So when you spend money, even on something necessary, your brain registers it as a loss, and losses trigger the threat response. Even if the thing you're buying is objectively good for you, even if it's a wise investment. This is why it feels so hard to spend money on things like therapy, or a gym membership, or fixing your teeth, or taking a day off. Logically, you know these things improve your life. But emotionally, your brain is screaming that you're losing resources. And in a world where resources equal survival, that feels dangerous. Now layer on top of that the fact that modern life is full of invisible financial threats. Subscriptions you forgot about, interest rates you don't fully understand, medical bills that show up 6 months after the appointment, taxes that are calculated in a way that feels deliberately confusing. Your ancestors didn't have to deal with compound interest, or copays, or the difference between a 401k and a Roth IRA, but you do. And every single one of those things is another variable your brain has to track. And here's the kicker. Your brain isn't good at abstract long-term planning. It's good at immediate survival. So when you try to think about retirement, or saving for a house, or building an emergency fund, you're asking your brain to care about a version of you that doesn't exist yet, and it doesn't want to. It wants to make sure current you survives this month. That's why it's so hard to save. That's why spending money on something small and immediate feels better than putting it towards something big and distant. Your brain is wired to prioritize the now, because in the environment it evolved in, there often wasn't a later. So what do you do with this information? First, you stop beating yourself up. If you've ever felt like you're bad with money, or lazy, or irresponsible because you can't seem to get ahead, I need you to understand something. You're not broken. You're not failing. You're just human. Your brain is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's trying to keep you safe. The problem is that the world changed faster than evolution could keep up. And now you're stuck trying to navigate a complex financial system with hardware that was built for a much simpler one. Once you understand that, the whole game shifts. Because now you're not fighting yourself. You're working with your brain, not against it. Here's what that looks like. Your brain needs certainty to calm down. It needs to know that the threats are handled. So instead of trying to track everything in your head, you build systems that give your brain proof. Automate what you can. Set up automatic transfers to savings. Automate bill payments. Not because you're too lazy to do it manually, but because every decision you have to make manually is another opportunity for your brain to panic. When something is automated, it's handled. Your brain can stop tracking it, and that frees up mental space for everything else. Second, give your brain small wins. Your amygdala doesn't understand long-term goals, but it does understand immediate relief. So if you're trying to pay off debt, don't just focus on the total. Focus on paying off the smallest balance first, even if it's not the most mathematically efficient strategy. Because when your brain sees progress, it calms down, and a calm brain makes better decisions. Third, separate your money into categories your brain can understand. One account for bills, one for spending, one for emergencies. It sounds simple, but it works because it mirrors the way your brain naturally organizes threats. Bills are handled. Emergencies are covered. Everything else is flexible. When your money has a job, your brain stops treating every dollar like it's the last one. And finally, give yourself permission to spend on things that reduce stress. I'm not talking about reckless spending. I'm talking about recognizing that sometimes, spending money now prevents a bigger problem later. Fixing your car before it breaks down completely. Going to the dentist before you need a root canal. Buying the slightly more expensive groceries because they're healthier and you'll feel better. Your brain will resist because it sees the immediate loss, but you have to override that, because the long-term gain is worth it. Let me give you a few things you can actually do this week. First, write down the top 3 financial worries that loop in your head. Not a full budget, not a 5-year plan. Just the 3 things that make your chest tight when you think about them. Maybe it's rent. Maybe it's credit card debt. Maybe it's the fact that you don't have an emergency fund, and you know you should. Once you have those 3 things, ask yourself, what's the smallest step I can take toward handling this? Not solving it completely. Not fixing everything overnight. Just one small step. If it's an emergency fund, Maybe the step is opening a separate savings account. That's it. You don't even have to put money in it yet. Just create the container. If it's debt, maybe the step is writing down the balances so you actually know what you're dealing with, because uncertainty makes everything worse. And once you have the numbers in front of you, they're usually less scary than the story your brain was telling. Second, build one financial habit that happens without you thinking about it. 1. Not 5, not 10, 1. For most people, I'd recommend automating savings, even if it's just $20 a week, because that $20 isn't about the amount. It's about proving to your brain that you're capable of putting something aside. And once your brain sees that pattern, it starts to relax. Third, give yourself a guilt-free spending category. I'm serious about this. Budget for something that has no practical purpose except making you feel human. Coffee, a book, a streaming service, whatever. Because if every dollar is allocated to survival, your brain never gets a break. And a brain that never gets a break makes bad decisions out of exhaustion. You need to prove to yourself that money isn't just about avoiding disaster. It's also about living. Look, I'm not going to tell you that understanding your brain's relationship with money will magically solve all your financial problems. It won't. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, you're still living paycheck to paycheck. If rent is too high, it's still too high. If wages haven't kept up with the cost of living, that's still true. But what understanding this does is give you a little bit of space. Space to realize that the anxiety you feel isn't a personal failing. It's a natural response to a system that wasn't built with your nervous system in mind. And in that space, you can start making decisions that actually work for you. Not because some finance guru told you to, but because you understand what your brain needs to feel safe. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to optimize every dollar. You don't have to feel guilty for being human. You just have to take the next small step. And then the one after that. Because progress doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real. And the fact that you're here, watching this, trying to understand how money works and why it feels the way it does, that's already progress. So take a breath. You're doing better than you think.